I'm going to try and find my best Rory Stewart, Eton-educated accent here. Hi, I'm Andy.
And I'm Roger,
And welcome to The Middle,
where we try to have thoughtful conversations
about awkward topics
on our search to find the middle.
We're going to give you last week's news today.
It's a slogan we should put on a t-shirt.
Stop touching her!
I am tonight announcing my candidacy.
Taylor Swift.
Look, my biggest issue with marriage is that I think that it's a fundamentally flawed institution that is built on the oppression of women.
I will not be lectured about sexism and misogyny.
Having truly rational conversations about controversial issues is risky these days.
Hey, Roger.
Andy, how you doing?
Pretty good. You ready for a listener question?
It's been a while, I suppose so. I am a man of the people.
Okay, this is from George. So George says, listening from the UK, I couldn't help but notice how different things seem down your way. Over here, council elections just swung heavily to the right, and honestly, Nigel Farage seems more powerful and influential than ever in shaping public attitudes. Yet in Australia and Canada, even pretty unpopular progressive governments manage to hold on power and even do well. Why do you think voters are pulling in such different directions? Are people rejecting progressivism here, as in the UK, I guess, but clinging to it elsewhere? Or is something else going on?
I try to make a habit not to launch into opinion on what's going on in other people's countries. But it's hard not to.
You've been invited.
I've been invited, yeah. So it's hard not to. George has invited me to step beyond our wheelhouse. But look, I think that the thing to probably understand about Australia is that we are a fair way down under. We're a massive island, and we are disconnected from the world in a lot of ways geographically, but we are intensely connected from a global scale. So I guess we do have the benefit of seeing things occur ahead of us and probably giving us enough time to decide what we would like to adapt and what we wouldn't, right? So we're almost lucky enough to see some of the lessons play out in front of us. So I think that Australia in some ways is afforded that so that we can learn from those lessons. And I think obviously the most current one would be Trump, right? And what actually happens when you give the new guy, the scruffy old guy, orange guy, a chance twice. And, there's one thing being anti-establishment and a hope, a dissatisfaction for the status quo and a hope for something better. And the only way to do that is to take the wrecking ball out and get Miley Cyrus to twerk on it as it knocks down all the institutions. But I don't think most people have the stomach for what that really means and the pain that you would have to go through. And so, the world's seeing that. And our elections, the Australian elections came after, well, what we hope is the apex of some of that and the tariff wars and all the tearing down of institutions in the States. So I think it was a bit of a, whoa, let's not go down that path, right? And so I think some of that was definitely a reaction. Now, when it comes to the UK, I guess the question you got to ask yourself is it working for you? Like, whatever style of government you have, like, is it working? And I think there are lots of reasons to believe there are a lot of problems and it's not working. And, the choices that led up to Brexit and migration policies and civil unrest and all this kind of businesses that we catch glimpses of in Andy's audit fetish on YouTube. So I guess that's a question you'd have to ask. And I'll throw it to you, Andy.
All right, well, I'm going to try and find my best Rory Stewart, Eton-educated accent here to try and comment on UK politics. I don't know enough about the ins and outs, except so this is my starting point, my assumptions and understanding. So if you're a UK listener or someone who knows more about UK politics than me, you can, if I'm wrong with these assumptions, that you can then take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. But you've got a country which is quite divided in terms of like London, sort of the southeast, and a very prosperous part of the country. Then you've got the rest of the UK, which is struggling in a lot of ways. Like, it's not even a metro regional split. It's actually London versus everywhere else sort of thing. So you've got that at play. And I think that has there's different cultural sort of factors at play in terms of how that impacts the political system than in a country like Australia, where you have major capital cities which are all quite progressive, but not necessarily a lot of discrepancy between capital cities, where you've got a lot more equal, even footing between even like Sydney and, say like second tier, if you like, cities like Adelaide, for example. There would still be culturally very similar. The second difference is, I think you've got, even the fact that it's council elections, right? Council elections, like that's kind of the perfect environment to give a protest vote. So if you're not happy with the Keir Starmer Labor government, and I understand that for various reasons, even though the Conservatives, the Tories aren't popular, they're very unpopular as well, but it's not like Labor. The Labor government in the UK is like this really popular, government. There's a lot of issues going on over there with, as I understand, with social security payments and benefits and things like that, which they're unpopular for. You've got immigration, you've got all these factors coming into play where they're being seen as sort of useless. So a council election, who, they kind of do things like make sure the bins are collected, it's the perfect environment to register your protest vote. But what we're not talking about is who do you want to put up to handle Donald Trump, for example? Like, who are you going to put up to negotiate your economic relationship with the biggest economy on the planet when you have a madman in charge, right? So, I think those factors were at play, most so for Canada than probably Australia even, but certainly when you're looking at a federal election here. The third big difference, and I would say probably the biggest difference between Australia and probably just about any other democratic system in the English-speaking world, is that we have compulsory voting and we have ranked choice voting. So you have to vote in Australia. You don't win elections by appealing to extremes. And even if you manage to get a lot of votes, that might not count for much if all of the minor parties direct their preferences against you. So that has an impact. And I think, we've got to do a sales pitch, I think, here in Australia, because we've got a pretty incredible voting system and it delivers good outcomes. And I think the rest of the world should get their notebooks out and take notes over the country that has the best political system in the world.
What do you Hubert?
That's Australia, by the way.
Pride before the fall. But I suppose, what do you think would be the transition from discretionary to compulsory voting? Where is?
Oh, they all hate it.
Yeah, but where has it been done before? It has been done before.
Well, it's been done before in Australia. I mean,
in the recent, in the recent history.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm not sure of any examples, but I don't know. I think there would be the problem. The irony is the incumbent sort of sources of power that guide policy decisions about these things are beneficiaries of optional voting. So generally, they're not going to be in favour of moving to a new system. So the kind of people who would favour compulsory voting in other political systems aren't in Parliament. They're not in power. So you don't tend to see change because incumbency kind of tends to nip that in the butt, sort of thing. So that's the problem. But so we're lucky. I would say Australia very lucky that we're endowed with compulsory voting and and ranked choice voting.
Yeah, there's preferences. I mean, Trump would say that the problem is trying to stop people from voting. All those illegals actually is not actually the wrong way to look at it. But no, look, everything that Andy and I know from UK is from Tommy Robbins and audit videos, so we probably shouldn't be talking about anything.
Well, you do get a very good insight into what it's like on the ground in the UK, right? So
from audit videos, to be clear, not Tommy Robbins.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's right. Well, probably that too, anyway. No, but like you see, for everyone who doesn't know, these are these silly videos that people go around like winding people up, but they've got their phones and they're filming like town centres and, until someone says, hey, why are you filming me? Kind of thing. Anyway, but you see like the UK in the wild, right? In its native environment, you don't see the glorified kind of curated image that you would see if you were even if you're in person, you're visiting like a place like London. Like you go to, like if you ever walked around the city of Westminster, where it's just so posh. It just feels so like it just feels like you can't afford. Yeah, like it feels like you can't even afford to be walking on the pavement there. Like you feel like, I'm about to get kicked out of this like neighborhood, right? I don't belong here. It just feels so high end and so upmarket.
How you
and
feeling
posh.
right there, Andy, is the stripping of your white privilege, and that's just how like all of us feel most of the time.
But like it's but you don't have to go very far away from Westminster to get to like, oh, this is like nitty gritty, like, and especially when you go up to, I don't know if it's necessarily just the north. It's probably, I mean, I think the south is generally more prosperous, but you know, some of the town centres and some of the really gloomy architecture from like post World War II,
Slough.
you know, where they just like, we can't let anyone have anything that, you know, looks anything more privileged than this eyesore that, you know, we're all, you know, the state sponsored sort of pre-approved architectural plans or whatever. It just looks so shit. Like this.
Good thing the
like,
capitalists won from the from the socialists, and then they just go and build that. You know what? Another country that feels like that even more extremely, I think, is Paris, because I think that you can be around the Seine, and it's just so beautiful and iconic, and then you travel 15 minutes in one direction, and all of a sudden it is like down and dirty. And that was a bit of a shock to the system. But I suppose it makes sense in a lot of these big cities, right? But that was a shock. Okay. I would say, getting to the heart of it though, do you think that Australians as a people are just a little bit more progressive?
I think the rest of the world would be surprised, because I think we're kind of seen as, like, on the global stage, we're kind of seen like a little bit like Texas, I think. You know, we're just like this, you know, slightly weird kind of out there kind of chill, but a little bit like racist and all that sort of, I actually don't think that's right at all. Like, and that's like, for one, I think most people don't realize about Australia is that we would probably have a higher proportion of our population living in urban centres, urban like cities. Like, Australia's a very cosmopolitan place because,
like Neapolitan, cosmopolitan.
We've got all three colours. Like it's not the kind of the country bumpkin backwater that I think some in other countries might think Australia is.
Crocodile Dundee has a lot to.
Yeah, but that's that. But also, I think we're considered like. I think if you looked at all of the countries on the planet, and you asked like people from around the world, like, name me your top 10 most racist countries, I think we would be in the top 10 for like a lot of people, right? And I don't think that's earned at all. Like, I think we have a very multicultural society. We have grappled with like our history in a way that other like people from other countries haven't. So the mere fact that people are shocked when they arrive in Australia and Qantas gives like an acknowledgement of country when it lands, like that kind of shocks people. And I know we have our own debates about acknowledgement and welcome to country ceremonies here in Australia, which came up in the election campaign. But nonetheless, we still have it. It's still a thing. No one's saying it shouldn't exist. And there's a whole bunch of areas where it's like, the more you're exposed to have to grapple with these issues, the more people can see race as an issue in the country. But then equally, you go to a place like Japan, where the reason they don't have to grapple with racism is because there's
monoculture.
No
I mean, I think that how I kind of place it is that maybe 15 years ago, Australia had a reputation similar to what you're talking about, where we were just kind of, that kind of stereotypical country bogan, ignorantly racist, and laid back, kind of like how The Simpsons portrays in their Australia episode. Where
oh, come on, we were never anything like that.
Calling to the Prime Minister, and he's in the little floaty drinking a tinny, which does happen. Don't get me wrong. So I think that was the portrayed kind of vision of Australians, at least from America, from the USA, and parts of Europe. But that has changed now. I think post and heading into the modern day Australian, we're seen a little bit differently. We have connotations of being a nanny state. We have this idea of actually, like, we're not as macho. In fact, we're quite compliant as a nation, aligned with that whole nanny state thing. So I think that reputation has turned a little bit for Australia. And actually, the kind of softness you see the people, Americans talk about, like Canadians, I think that is us now. That's how they place us now, that we are just like a mini Canada. You know, like we're just this kind of small mid-tier country. We're very progressive. We're very compliant, and we believe in, you know, a big government interventionist role in the citizens. You know, that's kind of how I think we're viewed by some people, and maybe that's not actually unearned in a lot of ways, right? Maybe that's better than being racist. I don't know.
I think we're like, even though we're culturally very different, I think we're actually a lot closer to like Scandinavian sort of, you know, system, or, you know, kind of, I don't know, society than say Texas, right? That was the opening gambit. So, and no one would actually, like, there's probably a lot of racists in Sweden as well, right? But it's just no one thinks of Sweden as a racist country. Like, I don't know. Yeah, again, maybe it's that, like, yeah, but you don't have to be racist when everyone's got blonde hair and blue eyes, right?
Well, you still find a way. It's kind of like Asians, right? Like the Asian cultures are very racist towards other Asian cultures.
Yeah, but like, apart from that, I do think I think what makes Australia different to a lot of maybe Europe, particularly, not so much America, but definitely Europe, is we don't have in Australia a sense of like refined sophistication. It's just like no one gives a shit if you like a third generation like Lord, you know, the Duchess and the Dutch of, you know, like that whole thing of like you know, class. Class and even just the performative nature of it, like, and a lot of Australians actively push back against class. Like you can be the most powerful person in the country, like you can be the Prime Minister, and you can act almost deliberately in a classless way. Like it's the classic Bob Hawke, like sculling a beer, like that's how you.
Yet we're still a monarchy.
Yeah, but that's how you like say we're not that. We define ourselves differently to that, and I think sometimes people can confuse that with sort of as though we're a bit uncouth, but it's actually us owning. It's the equivalent of like gay pride, you know, like bogan pride. You know, it's like we're owning the worst of the stereotypes because why not? It's more fun.
Yeah, take back brunch for the boys. But yeah, I mean, the class thing is relevant in this listener's question as well. Obviously in the UK, and look, I wouldn't underestimate the whole hangover from Brexit. Right? You know, Brexit happened. There should have been lessons learnt there about a huge part of the population, like you said, outside of London, that had, you know, felt like they were left behind from the modern experiment of globalization, I suppose, in a very crude way. And that's still there. That's like what has happened to help them. Yeah, like nothing's happened since Brexit.
All right. Well, I hope we've answered your question, George. So you need to do what so many of your other countrymen have done and move to Australia if you want a good political system.
I was going to say unless you support Hamas, but I will leave that in.
All right. Over and out.